everybody. This is Carlos. Thanks for joining us. On today's show, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Brad Bernardini of Breakneck Boa Company. Brad is one of the top breeders on the East Coast. We're going to talk about how he got involved in the boa game and his plans for the upcoming season. We're also going to talk about his work integrating the blood gene into the sharp complex. Finally, we're going to talk about what it's like to maintain a breeding collection while working as an orthopedic doctor. Boa Rack Radio is on the air now. Welcome everybody to Boa Rack Radio. I'm your host, Carlos Rojas of Horse Unleashed. Today our guest is Dr. Brad Bernardini of Breakneck Boa Company. Based out of New Jersey, Brad is well known for his cutting-edge work integrating the blood gene into many sharp complex boa morphs. Brad, welcome to the show, man.
Carlos, thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on here, man. Been admiring your work for a long time, and especially the stuff you've been doing with blood, and we'll get to that in a second. But
sure.
For those of you that don't know Brad, I want to give him a chance to kind of give a little bit of his background. So, Brad, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in reptiles and eventually how that led you to get involved with boas.
Sure. A kid growing up in the woods, finding snakes and salamanders, and probably the same story that most of us have. But I really got into boas when I was in college. I ran track and I played football at Bucknell in Pennsylvania. And a good buddy of mine on the track team, after practice one day, said, "Hey, I got to run over to the animal behavior complex and I got to feed my snake." And I said, "I'll go with you." I always loved animals. So we went over, and there was this huge, walk-in room that was set up as basically this boa's cage. And it was, I look back now, I have no idea what it was then, but it was probably like a Peruvian, big, beautiful yellowish buckskin snake. And I call it the adrenaline test now. It basically just did something to me, and it really kind of got me going. And shortly after that, started to do, a lot of research. I'm going to date myself, but I went to college. There was no internet. Email was just starting. And so did a lot of written research, found some resources for some different animals. And I very quickly started to go through a bunch of different species. I had carpets, I had balls, I had, standard boas. I had some dark Central Americans. I had a white-lip python for a while. And then I came across an article and found emerald tree boas. And I really, really was taken by the arboreal species. And I first got an Amazon. Then I got 2 Amazons. Then I transitioned into emeralds. And this is right around when I was graduating from college. And so I took a year between college and med school to grow up a little bit and get my grades in order. But I had emeralds through this time. And I would, wherever I lived, I had a little one-room studio in Philly. And I dedicated a whole closet to my emerald collection. First went through some wild caughts, which was,
fun, I bet.
Fun. No, yeah, not fun. And then got smart enough to look into, captive borns. And I got hooked up with a guy in med school. I went to med school in Chicago, a guy named Noe Perez, who was really good friends with Tony Nicolai at the time. He had an amazing emerald collection. And as I look back now, I didn't realize how unique that niche was. Amazons were just starting to be brought in. I didn't get into Amazons then. Fast forward, med school, residency, too busy to really keep animals. So I had to get rid of my collection.
Right.
In about 2015, my wife and I have twin boys. They were 5 at that time. And my wife caught a snake, baby rat snake, in the yard, and she kept it for the kids. And we got home, and they were super excited about it. And it really kind of re-energized me to get back into the hobby. They said, "Can we keep it?" I said, "Well, for a little while," and it really kind of got me going again. So we decided to go to a couple reptile expos, and I went to the White Plains show, and my kids loved it. And I felt like a kid again. And it just got me back into it. So that was actually the year that I really started to get back into it. We were just building a new house then, and there was 1,000 square feet above our garage that we didn't know what to do with. And it's now the man cave / reptile room, and it's been awesome. No ladies allowed up here, so my wife doesn't get to come up here. It's just me and the boys. But we really built a collection, from there, and it's really been exciting. The thing that was really fun was looking around that reptile show. When I got out, I had emeralds, but there was albinos were just starting to come into the trade.
Right.
And, I started to do research, and I could not believe what was out there genetically. And that really excited me because that's really fun stuff. And, but the bloods caught me right out of the gate. Vin Russo's table, Anthony Martinez, DNA breeders there. I saw some bloods and I just couldn't stop thinking about them. And that really kind of sparked a fire with me.
Yeah, dude, that's absolutely awesome. And like I said, we're going to talk about the blood stuff in a little bit because I think you were one of the first guys, like within the general population outside of Vin and Anthony and maybe Tom Burke that, looked at the potential that bloods had, right? So let's talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that you're passionate about outside of boas.
Yeah, so, like I mentioned, I played football and I ran track in college and just absolute sport fan, but I've found that the discipline and the just everything about sport just really was part of who I was. So the first couple of years out of college, I was kind of glad I didn't have a game or a meet to go to every Saturday.
Yeah.
But then I started to lose my motivation to train, so I started getting into triathlon. So now I actually compete in Ironman distance triathlon now.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, and it's awesome. It's a great sport, great culture of people. It really kind of forces you to look yourself in the mirror. So I do that as kind of a physical outlet. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and I'm a sports medicine specialist. So I specialize in shoulder and knee surgery. And but part of that I really love is actually the injury prevention side and kind of understanding how sports performance and training can prevent some of these injuries that we see. So we actually started a new business this past year. It's a medically backed sports performance center. It's called the Energy Lab, and we really wanted to combine orthopedists with physical therapists, athletic trainers, strength and conditioning coaches to kind of work together as a team, like kind of like an Avengers team, so to speak. Each have our own gifts, and we bring a kind of a whole kind of comprehensive view to an injured athlete or a prevention of an injured athlete, and it's been a really fun thing. So that's been another real kind of passion of mine, because it really kind of brings together my jock side with my physician side, and that's been a lot of fun. And then I'm definitely a family guy, Italian, South Jersey guy. My parents are here. My dad's one of my partners in the group. My wife and kids, they mean everything to me. So, family first, sports, medicine, and boas. They're my four pillars.
Yeah, I think I'm standing on the same pillars on this side too, dude.
Awesome.
So it's interesting that you talked about the fact that you guys are combining all those things together. One of the things that I noticed, so I'm coming kind of from the military medicine side of the house, right?
Yeah.
And I spent 10 years in the military special operations community, and we actually had a lot of that stuff going. It seems like for a long time, the only people that were really integrating, the orthopedic medicine into injury prevention and also bringing in the sports performance aspect of it was really, within military special operations and then professional sports, right? So I'm glad that now there are places popping up like your practice where, everybody ranging from the high school athlete to the professional athlete can go there and get the right type of care and the right type of advisement to help them perform at their maximum levels. So that's pretty awesome, man.
Yeah, it's amazing. It hasn't really been done well before because it's such a needed concept.
Oh, absolutely, dude.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. So let's talk a little bit about how Breakneck Boas began and kind of what made you go from a hobby collection into a breeding collection.
I'm one of those guys that seems to kind of jump into whatever I do with both feet, head, shoulders, and again, this was always a passion of mine, and I kind of lost it for a while. And then so after kind of finding that my young kids had an interest, it kind of gave me a green light to get it past my wife is something.
Right.
That
Gotta love when the kids serve as good excuses, right?
They're for the kids.
For us to be kids again.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I really, I used to back, when I was in college, a good buddy of mine and I used to keep together, and we always used to talk about, hey, wouldn't it be cool to, have a breeding program and be able to do what we love and create a little bit of a business out of it and have a little bit of, financial benefit from it. And
yeah, so, totally. Right.
So I kind of thought the same thing. And I kind of have this entrepreneurial spirit. So, but I also wanted the kids to see, that something that you love could also be something that can be a business,
Absolutely.
And that you can develop. And so, they're young, but they get it. And they kind of see what we've done with it. And I just think it makes a lot of sense. I know you've had some really good guests on. I've listened to your podcast and I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, man.
And I think it was Eric with Prism.
Yeah, Prism Python. Yeah.
And he did a great job kind of explaining the business benefits, tax benefits, being able to pay for a hobby that you love through some tax breaks and some, business benefits that are out there. I think it's a no-brainer. I think it shows a level of dedication and passion towards something that is more than just keeping, some snakes in an aquarium stuck in your closet, and I think it speaks to the level of interest you have in the animals and the, the hobby.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. And you know what? I share your sentiment on that stuff because one of the things that I did is, I've always loved my boas and I've always loved, being able to keep. But it really was when my kids started getting a little bit older and they got involved with the hobby. Yeah. They got to, number one, see how to conduct business, how to take care of, your stock. And in a lot of sense, it's like a different version of ranching, right? Sure. It's like the city slicker version of ranching,
absolutely,
for lack of other better terms. But it's always worked out cool. And you know what? One of the things that I've told people in the past is one of the main reasons. Like my daughter was afforded the opportunity to be a top tier athlete. She was actually the number one recruit for softball in the nation, right?
Wow.
And one of the main reasons that she got there is because she was able to play a lot of travel softball. And at the time, during a significant portion of the time that she was traveling for softball, that thing was expensive, man. And I was an active duty guy, and I wasn't making much money. The reason that she basically was able to be on teams and to travel all over the country playing was because the BOAs provided the funds that she used to, participate in her athletic endeavors. And, she essentially worked for it. She was in here cleaning, snake crap when she was, 7, 8 years old, fully knowing that at the end of the day, there was going to be some sort of a payoff for her. You know what I mean?
That's exactly part of what I'm doing too. I'm getting them involved. I want them to learn about work ethic and what it means to put in time and see a reward as a result of that time put in. And, I think those are all little lessons, and this is like a real world version of that. Funny story. We also have a dog kennel. It's actually just one dog. He's a stud. The breed is called a Tamaskin, which is like this rare breed. It's meant to look like a wolf.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah. It's a really cool dog. I love wolves, and so when we started to look for puppies, I found this breed. Yeah. Anyway, we got this male, and he's a stud. So we actually used the boas and the dog to teach the kids about the birds and bees, and it was so awesome.
That's awesome, dude.
They were there for all this, and they got to, we got to, kind of go through that with them. But little lessons, things that you might not think about, they pop up all the time, and I thought, this is just a great opportunity for it.
Awesome, man. So let me ask you, who were some of the people that mentored you or people that you looked up to when you first got into this hobby, and even people that maybe you have professional envy for? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, definitely going back to the Emeralds, Noe Perez, who I think plays more hockey than handles boas now. He was a guy who really taught me a lot. Very, very professional guy, high standards. I think most arboreal keepers, especially emeralds, are a little bit type AAA and a little bit OCD about things. So he kind of taught me that level, of perfection, so to speak, when it comes to conditions. After getting back into it here, I was a little bit of a lone wolf for a while. I did a little research online and looked at a ton of pictures and did some, shows. Vin Rosso is I've gotten some animals from him. He's been very good. But there's a guy that lives right around the corner from me. His name's John Romeo. Romeo's Reptile.
Oh yeah, of course, man. John's a buddy of mine.
John and I are very close, and we back and forth frequently to each other's place. We've gotten to be really good friends through this, and he has been, a tremendous resource to me for, just tips and tricks. And have you heard of this? And what do I do with this? And who do you know that does this? He's just been great. He's a great guy, super guy.
Absolutely,
he's amazing animals. He's got a little bit of a sleeper collection.
Yeah, he does. Shout out to John out there.
Yeah, shout out to John for sure. And through John, I got to be pretty friendly with Ryan and Bob Horsch at R&R Reptiles, and those guys make some absolutely amazing animals. I mean, Ryan over the last couple of years has kind of gotten a little quiet. He fell in love and got married. That whole thing. Yeah. Kind of got in the way of
Boo.
Yeah, boo. But great guys, and so those guys have been very helpful too. Chris Gilbert, I fell in love with the Jungle Blood gene, and Chris has been great. He's one of those guys you can call to get, the background on any gene or history of any animal, and he's really, really technical. He's been great. Those are all guys. Mike Weitzman, I email with him back and forth. Mike Roscoe, Rich Del Bono, those guys have all been great.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things I really love about the hobby is that the network of people, and I love the diversity of people that are in it, and it's just a fun group.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. So let's talk a little bit about what you're currently doing. Talk to me about some of the projects you're working on and some of the things that you're hoping to accomplish this year and the upcoming year. So
when I first got into this, I literally was, again, like I said, just struck by all the genes and the colors and I went a little nuts. I think I got the ARC syndrome. I became a little impulsive in my buying. I don't know that I had a plan. And I would urge any newbies to really not do what I did. And that's probably, I don't want to say it's a regret because I think you learn by your failures, but also so much of a failure as it is just a lesson. But so I really kind of then took a step back and said, what, just like in medicine, we've become so subspecialized because you can become very, very good at a very narrow range of things and therefore provide a better product. And, my product in medicine is surgery and outcomes. And so I thought, it makes sense to do that in this industry as well. And again, one of the things that really grabbed me was blood. And I realized at the time, there just weren't a lot of people that were really focusing on blood. Right. I have a tendency to, if everybody's going, left, I'm going to go right. And so a lot of people are starting to work with call blood, beautiful and really cool projects. But I decided to take it in the opposite direction just because I wanted to have a niche market, because I knew that I was going to be someone that had, limited time to have a relatively small collection, and that I wanted to, produce the rarest mix with the highest quality that I could. And I couldn't just have a big generalist, group. So I went the sharp blood route. And that was really my, once I decided to focus my practice in boas, that's really where I went. And I'm really glad I did. I think there's a lot of really cool projects that kind of brought me into the T-positive, sharp compatible projects.
Right.
Which I'm really very excited about. So Dave Palumbo beat me to it. I think we had animals from the same litter, to be honest, but he beat me to it and produced Paradigm Blood the year before I did. So I think his were in 17. I made my first batch in 18. I repeated the breeding this year and made another batch. They're just absolutely amazing animals. I think almost better than the fire opal. I actually was really going towards the fire opal, and I just happened to find a 2013 female that was a double het BWC berry blood, and so I said, she's of age, I'm going to throw in a double het sharp blood with her, and it really I got some amazing animals from them.
Oh,
And
so you're using the Berry bloodline, huh? That
half of it's the Berry bloodline.
really
Yeah,
that's awesome,
yeah,
man.
the female's Berry. Yeah,
People are sleeping on that bloodline a lot, man.
well, it's really interesting. It's the same. It's from the same blood gene, so they all came over from El Salvador,
Right.
And the original blood bag, so to speak, had type 2 antares and bloods in it, but then they were line bred from there. So the Berry blood is just kind of a darker, deeper,
like a richer color, right?
Yeah, richer color, but they have these dark hues, a little bit maroons in them, and they're really neat. More popular right now, it seems, in Europe than they are here, but
yeah.
I'll tell you, they're really amazing. So I've actually been looking for some of those. Look, you can name the bloodline, but the reality is, I've been looking for that phenotype,
right?
Since I started getting back into it. I came across a couple guys over the last 2 years that were these little sleeper collections. The guys just have amazing animals, and I'm really trying to create a foundation now for the future. And I think that my palette, so to speak, will be the blood sharp and the T positive, paradigm paradise blood projects, and then from there we'll start to really add in some color saturation and some codon pattern genes and some pastels. And I think there's so much possibility. IMG, I can't wait to see one of my little guys understands genetics. Oh,
that's awesome.
It's really cool. And his big, and I agree. I can't say it's just his, but a paradigm jungle IMG blood, I think, or a paradise, you can flip flop those. I think would be an amazing visual animal. So there's a lot of potential out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Are there any other projects kind of outside of the blood complex that maybe you have or you're thinking about picking up that kind of have you excited?
I think they're probably all kind of peripherally related to the blood project, but I'll tell you one other gene that I really like is the square tail gene. I think it's been
super underrated.
Super underrated. I think the cool thing about it is it's both a color and pattern recessive gene, or at least we think it is right now. And so they originally came from a Cooch line of pastel, and they're just really neat animals. They have a lot of color. They have a really strong pattern, which I like. I tend to like very strong, kind of aggressive patterns. And the coloration, the saturation is amazing. So I think to be able to plug those into some of the sharp and blood projects, I think would be cool. But I think ultimately everything is going to probably feed back into the blood for me.
Right.
And that's just, like I said, that's just going to be my niche. And I think there are other guys that do, and girls that do a lot of really cool things in different subspecialty niches that I think I'll let them run with that ball.
Awesome, man. So let me ask you, what are some important lessons you learned kind of setting up your reptile business, kind of throughout the hobby?
From a technical perspective, I think the lessons I've learned is don't get your animals before you have a stable environment for them to be in.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. And I
Yep.
through college and through med school, I was constantly moving. And I could tell you stories. I drove from Chicago to New Jersey with 4 emerald tree boas, in my passenger seat. Ridiculous stories. And, then I'd come home and I'd have to set up a whole, room. And I was, pretty dedicated to them. And so, it never hurt me, but I think a lot of people now get really excited about getting the animal, and then they get it, and then they try to figure out what to do with it and how to create a stable environment. So I think having, stable conditions, humidity, temperature, doing your background research, reading the books, understanding, what you need to do to give them the environment that they're going to be able to thrive in, I think is critical before you start to bring in your animals. So I would say invest in your environment before you invest in your animals.
That's actually a really good tip, man, because I'll be honest, I'm one of those people that definitely made that mistake. So like back when I was 20 years old, I had just graduated from the Special Operations Pipeline, okay?
Yeah.
Which is like a whole 2-year deal within the military, right? Just so you can essentially even get to a team, right? And during that time, my wife was also in the Navy. And we actually had to drive my little collection, which this is back in 2000, dude, and we're talking about, you know, a relatively small collection, but expensive for the time. So I had some albino boas, right?
Wow.
That I had picked up from Bob Clark at the time. And,
Wow.
dude, we drove them. My wife was stationed in Connecticut at the time. And I had just gotten assigned to my first special operations unit in California. So we had to drive all the way from Connecticut to California in a Geo Prism with
Classic.
nothing but, oh, dude, it was such a shit show. Like, I'm talking about, like, holding the snakes in front of the heater, and it's the middle of winter, because I graduated in November from my pipeline, so I was supposed to report at the beginning of December at my new unit, and we're driving around, holding these things up to the heater, just freaking out, you know, like sticking snakes in our clothes to keep them, make sure they're, you know, at the right temperature. Yeah, like now that I remember, it was just such a shit show, man. But you know, we didn't know any better.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I used to put the foot heat on and throw them underneath there to let them warm up a little bit. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. But I think that's important. I think a lot of people, because the rest of it falls in place. I think if you give them what they need, you know, you'll be able to keep, a happy collection, and then you can continue to build it if you have, you know, the space and the environment that you need. Because otherwise, you know, you start it, they get sick, you know, you're thrown off, you're discouraged, and you're not going to continue to, you know, kind of thrive in the hobby.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And because of those mistakes in the beginning, like there was a couple times where I felt like getting out of the hobby, you know? Yeah. Like I remember when one of my albino boas, when we finally got to the West Coast, at the time, my daughter was fairly young, and she opened up the terrarium, because this is back in the terrarium days, because nobody was keeping anything in cages, right? And one of the albino boas got out, and it disappeared for about 6 months while I was on my first deployment, right? So I'm out there, like, you know, running special operations in the middle of freaking nowhere, you know, not being able to call home. And I get home only to find out that my snake's been missing for about 4.5 months.
Well, it's probably good that you didn't know.
Well, the funny thing is, I go to turn on my car, which had been sitting in the garage this whole time, right? And the car won't turn on, so I, you know, pop the engine. I'm like, well, you know, do I need an oil change? Did I get a rodent in there? And I started looking in, dude. And the freaking snake was sitting in the middle of the engine.
Oh, my God.
How I didn't kill that poor snake, it was just absolutely amazing. But she ended up living for another, like, 15 years. Well, so it all worked out, you know. Yeah. But I feel you, man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, man. So let me ask you, where do you see the future of the hobby going?
You know, I think, to me, yeah, I don't know, maybe it's a selfish hope, but I think it seems to me that people are becoming a little bit more specialized in their collections.
Totally.
Like I talked about earlier. And I think what that's going to do is it's going to force quality, and it's going to force, you know, instead of having this competitiveness between breeders and who's first to the, you know, to the world's first, and who's got, you know, this gene in their collection first, I think it's going to allow a little bit of a better collaboration between people. And, you know, because when you're specialized in something and you do something, you know, really well, there'll be a handful of people that do it too, but you'll feel a kinship with them. And then, but you'll also know, you know, where the people are that do the other stuff that you don't do well. And you can say, oh, you know what, I don't do that, but this guy does, and he does a really good job of it. Call him. And I think it creates a little bit more of a community and a collaboration. I mean, so for instance, my orthopedic group, we're pretty big. We have 50 some people in it.
Oh, wow. And, that's a good size practice,
so man. And you know, if I don't do something well, I'm very quick to say, hey, that's out of my wheelhouse, but I have a, you know, partner that does a really good job of that. And I think people appreciate that. And I think the same would go for, you know, the boa community and you know, the reptile game. And I think that I see it kind of heading in that direction. So again, I think that'll force quality, because when you're doing a lot of something, you're able to see some nuances in maybe the litters and some of the color variations and some of the pattern variations that you say, I know what this does. I've seen it 5 times before, and this is the one that I'm going to hold back and breed, or this is the one that I'm going to recommend to this, client that, wants to buy a high level bow and put into a serious breeding program. Because, if you just produce 1 or 2 litters here and there with different genes and you haven't seen it before, you may miss some subtle cues that you otherwise would have picked up on if you would have had some experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, man. So, brother, we're going to take a quick break right now, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about some tips about keeping your collection when you have a real busy schedule, all right?
Sounds good.
All right, guys, we're back. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Brad, is what it's like to keep a collection with a busy schedule. The reality is, like, this day, most of us work, right? And despite where your career is, whether it's from being an auto mechanic to an enlisted military member to a doctor, most of us have a significant time demand on our hands, right? And on top of that, a lot of us are parents, and that puts another strain onto the free time that we have that if we were single, we would be able to dedicate to our animals. Well, so the thing is, despite whatever our schedule is and, how much time we have available, our animals still need to be cared for and they still need to be given the best possible care. So with that in mind, what are some of the things that you do to ensure that you have enough time to take care of your collection, especially while working as a doctor?
Yeah, great question. I think it probably goes back to my college experience. So I played sports, and so I had always been kind of forced into a very structured schedule, and I think I tend to thrive in that kind of environment. And so it seems to me that the busier I am, the better I am, so to speak. And I think there's probably some lessons that people can learn from that. I think what I try to do is I try to balance my life between those 4 pillars that I talked about earlier. My family being number 1 on that. I think there are stories of people that become so obsessed by their collection that they're not spending time with their family and their kids. I think that's absolutely wrong. But profession, taking care of yourself. I still train. I work out every day. I think that's critical. And then your animals and your family. So. I think balance and efficiency of time are the 2 probably big things to focus on. And there's some interesting resources that are out there to actually help. There's a great book called The 5 Choices. And it talks about kind of optimizing the time that you have in the busy world that we live in. And it really talks about these 4 different quadrants of time based on, urgency and importance of different factors in life. And I'm not going to get into the details of it, but a couple of the things that I really took from that were to define the roles that you have in your life, and what are those roles, and how important are those roles to you, and then what are the goals within each of those roles. And
right.
I think that really makes it sounds kind of silly to have to sit down and actually write those out, but sometimes going through an exercise like that actually helps.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it kind of forced me to determine that those are those 4 pillars of my life that I think are important. I think you have to know when to not overextend yourself. And I believe me, I've been there before. And I think sometimes you have to walk the line to realize what that is. But I think you have to make a point to schedule each one of those roles into your day. Family time, workout time, obviously professional or work time is already usually set up for most of us. And then your hobby, your boa time. And I think if you have a reasonable schedule on a daily basis where you can say, okay, this hour is dedicated to this part of my life, and don't cheat. You can't go over, no extra time in any of those scheduled windows. I think it's really helped me personally to be able to kind of balance life in the way that I want to do it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, one of the things that you brought up is that a lot of times some people feel silly, setting up those type of exercises. And the one thing I would add to that is that regardless of whether or not you feel silly, it's a tool, right? And like any other tool, if you
Absolutely.
leverage it correctly, it's going to provide you an advantage. If you look at people that are successful regardless of what industry they're in, right, one of the common threads, right, is the fact that planning does become one of the things that they tend to focus on, right? So, for example, like a professional team doesn't go to a game and wing it. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you're playing football, you're practicing, which is great, but you're also coming up with a specific game plan for whatever the specific situation that you're going to face on Saturdays or Sundays, right? So that's one of the things that people need to keep in mind. When I was in special operations, we would never just go out on a mission and be like, yeah, let's go kill some bad guys today. You know what I mean? We would take a long time to, do a lot of reconnaissance to be able to come up with, tangible mission plans that would address some of the things that we would be facing. Yeah. And part of that was a really big time component where we would set realistic goals for ourselves and time hacks that we had to meet at every one of those kind of stations, for lack of a better word, right? And by doing so, we were able to be a little bit more successful, and we were able, more importantly, to build some buffer time, right, into whatever we were doing. And I think when people don't do that when it comes to their collection, then what they're going to end up feeling like is like they're constantly chasing their tail, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's actually the concept of this book, The 5 Choices. So it basically talks about the more time you spend on emergencies and urgent issues, the less time you have for proactive planning and thinking, and you end up chasing your tail. And then the other part, the other quadrant, so to speak, of that that graph basically is wasted time. And there have actually been some studies that suggest that most people waste up to 4 hours a day doing things that aren't really productive, so to speak. And whatever that means to you individually is obviously a very personal thing. But to think that 4 hours of our day are going to stuff that probably doesn't need to have that time is kind of scary. So I think to be efficient with your time and to use it well and to be productive is probably what's helped me to accomplish some of the things that I've accomplished to date.
Yeah, no, totally, man. I think anybody that's ever accomplished anything significant, that's one thing that you will always find. And I have a lot of friends who are very successful within the business world, within the professional sports world, and obviously within the medical world. And one of the common themes that I see out there with these folks is the fact that they always try to utilize their time to the most efficient manner possible, right? So, for example, if one of the things that I noticed that's really common with the most successful boa breeders is the fact that they get obsessed about everything that they do, whether it's boas or whether it be like picking up a new hobby, right? It's like, for example, we're when we were offline, we're talking a little bit about, archery and bow hunting. Most guys that kind of get into this sort of stuff, they don't go out and they pick up a bow and that's kind of where it ends. They kind of shoot it here or there. They go on a research binge. It's the same thing when people get interested in boas. They don't just be like, oh, look at this pretty boa. The ones that actually get successful are the ones that are up till like 1 a.m. at night, looking at the various morphs, figuring out how they interact with each other. And then essentially that passion that gets projected into their little hobbies, if leveraged correctly, is the passion that ends up making them successful in life, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And you got to channel it in the right direction to be able to have it produce, results for you. And I think, that's the critical thing. I actually, I'll sit around and daydream a little bit, but most of my time is pretty focused on the moment that I'm in, and that's actually another point I think to bring up. There have been a lot of recent research on happiness and what creates happiness, and one of the things that's been found to create happiness the most is just being in the moment that you're in, and not letting your mind race too much about all the other issues that you have.
Absolutely,
what's going to be in the future,
man.
What happened in the past. And I think that's one of the things I like about, the other aspects of my life. When I'm out training, for an Ironman, I'm on a 6, hour bike ride. I'm thinking about pedal stroke. I'm thinking about the road. I'm thinking about, where I am in the moment. When I'm out on a, 20-mile run, similar thing. When I'm in the snake room and I'm with the snakes, I find it very almost meditative, and I don't overhandle my animals, but I when they're out, I think it forces you to be very calm and quiet, and you got to get, get your energy in the right
Absolutely.
space
There's
to
like
be
a
able to
certain
handle it.
zen level to it, right?
There's a zen level to it, and all those things have been shown to actually correlate. I mean, that's what meditation is effectively. It's being able to be in the moment and not have your mind race about all the other things that are going on in your world. So I think those are all important lessons.
Yeah, totally, man. So let me ask you, what are some of the potential pitfalls that people should try to avoid when it comes to managing their collection with limited time?
Well, I think, we kind of alluded earlier to overextending the size of your collection and the breadth of your collection. I think trying to chase what other people are kind of doing in the hobby, I think is a dangerous thing. My personal feeling is, I got into the blood genes and some of the things that I do because again, they passed the adrenaline test for me. When I look at these morphs and I interact them, it just really gets me excited. There's a million things I can look at, a million genes that other people probably love that probably don't do it very much for me. And I'm going to leave those to somebody else, and I'm just going to focus on my little niche. And I think probably not, that would be my biggest advice, is to not chase other people's goals and to not overextend your collection or the size of your collection by kind of getting caught up in this ARC syndrome where you want to have two of everything.
Yeah, and it's a real thing, man. I think most of us go through that at some point, within our collective days. I did it too, man. There was a time where I had, like 15 different species instead of focusing on, one or two species that I could have done really well. I kind of half-assed 15 different species.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah, awesome, man. So let's talk about if you have any tips on things people can do to maximize their time efficiency. So give me some tangible items that you do for yourself to ensure that you use your time effectively.
So I really do schedule my day to the best ability that I can. So I start every day with a workout just because I know that that's protected time that nobody's going to be able to take from me. So I'll get up at 5 and I'll train for 2 or 3 hours if I'm, in race mode. And then, I clearly work is going to be scheduled. So for me, work is typically 9 to 5 kind of thing. And then from there, I'll schedule specific time to be able to block out for, family time or important issues that have to do with my personal life. I think those are very important things to do. It'd be very easy for me to let those things go if I just let everybody else around me control my time. So I think you have to be able to lean back against what other people are asking of you outside of your family. You never lean back against your family, especially your wife. That's bad.
Oh yeah.
But I think it's okay to lean back against the other things that want to encroach on our lives because they can be detrimental to the things that really make you happy. And so I think that's probably a tangible thing. Schedule your day, like really schedule your day. And again, it might seem a little bit OCD to people who aren't used to doing it, but I think it really has helped me, frankly. And then other things, just from like a medical health perspective, eat right, sleep well, hang out with your friends and drink some beers. I think those are the things those are all things that are real connections to health and wellness. And I think in this day and age, not enough people do those things.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. So let's pivot a little bit and let's start talking about your work with the blood gene and with and how that gene has interacted with recessive morphs. So the blood gene's a really interesting gene in the sense that right now, obviously, it's one of the hottest genes in the market. Everybody seems to want to have or bring in blood gene into their collection. But the ironic thing is, for a really long time, the blood gene was relegated to the back row of most people's collections, whether it was because it was seen as a purely Central American gene, right? And then the Colombian people didn't want to bring it in, didn't want to mess with it, right? Because they're like, oh no, that's a small boa gene, right? Yeah. Or, simply because it was just an afterthought to a lot of people. People obviously were aware of it. It's one of the oldest recessive genes in the hobby, right? But really, it didn't really start hitting hard until probably Tom Burke produced the first Sharp Bloods. And then people started paying attention because all of a sudden, he released a couple of videos on YouTube. And all of a sudden, people lost their damn mind. So people started thinking, oh, I need blood in my collection because I want to make some blood sharps. I want to make some blood calls. And it seems like the majority of the people started working on the blood call kind of side of the house, because I think most people had calls in their collection, because that's, the reality is that was the most affordable albino bloodline at the time. But now it's become that this gene is definitely a serious must-have for any collector, right? So let me ask you, why did you choose to start working with the blood? What attracted you to that particular gene?
It just got me. The first time I saw bloods, nice bloods, at a show, they just really kind of grabbed me. And it's hard sometimes to verbalize what you feel when you look at an animal or you see, I think.
But it's visceral, right?
Yeah, that's what I think I've mentioned a couple of times. I call it the adrenaline test. I mean, it's got to get you. It's got to do something to you. And then I like to try to walk away from it. And if I can walk, I mean, really, it's like that, expensive car you want to buy.
You're like, nope.
Walk away,
and then you come back and do the loop
from it. Yeah, if you can walk away from it and stay away from it, then it wasn't, right. But this is something that just kept pulling me back. And I think initially there probably was a little bit of this perception that bloods brown out when they get older, and some of them did. And but I think, again, just like any other gene that's out there, I think it's about the quality of the gene and the line that you're dealing with. And I think we're starting to see some refinement of some of these bloodlines, and I think we're starting to understand which bloodlines do brown out with time and which become more vibrant, with time. And then, of course, once you start to add multiple recessive genes together, a blood shark, fire opal, sun dragon, those are really amazing. And to be able to start to think about where else you can go with those is really kind of, for me, exciting. The thing that I really, one of the reasons I went in the sharp direction instead of the call direction was because I like to be, I like to be a little bit off the beaten path. And at the time, everybody was starting to work with call bloods, and I said, I'm not going to play catch up. I'll go this way. There were a handful of people that were doing it, and the thing that at the time it was just the Sharp Blood project that kind of took me in that direction, and then I started to kind of get into the Paradigm and the Paradise genes, which are Prodigy and BWC. I realized that there's a really cool genetic kind of component to it, and I the kind of the medical science guy really kind of enjoys that part of thinking about these things. So a lot of people are a little bit confused about what a Paradise or a Paradigm is, and so I'll just step back and we'll just do a little brief synopsis.
Yeah, definitely, that'd be great, man, because I know a lot of people are interested in the genetics associated with the Sharp complex, but they're intimidated by the names because they hear Blood Woman, Caramel, Paradigm, Paradise, right. And there's a little bit of a sticker shock at that, I would say, to a lot of folks.
And I think it's a little confusing genetically, so people don't really understand.
So break that down for us, man.
So we have albinos in simple terms are the lack of melanin, which is the pigment that produces dark colors. There's actually 3 different subtypes of melanin. There's a brown, a black, and a red. And so Call and Sharp, when they originally were kind of imported, were bred together and found to not be compatible. So right off the bat, that's something I think everybody should actually take a step back and think about, because Call is considered a T negative or T minus, which means tyrosinase, which is this enzyme that makes melanin. So if you don't have it, if you're negative for that gene to make that enzyme, you can't make melanin, so that means you can't have dark colors. So that's where we get the light colors and the pink eyes and all that good stuff. Well, Sharp isn't compatible with Call. So if Sharp truly is a T negative, then why isn't it compatible? So that was the first question that kind of got me. It didn't make sense to me. And you can have different genetic recessive deficiencies that result in the same outcome. But that was the first thing I thought was a little weird.
Right.
The other thing was, once we found that you had these 2 T-positive genes, the BWC, Boa Woman Caramel, and the Prodigy, that were actually found to be on the same allele
Mm-hmm.
with the sharp gene. So an allele basically is the parking spot on the chromosome for a gene. And if these genes are paired together, that means they're performing a similar function. And so, right off the bat, it kind of muddies the water a little bit with regard to what we think is an albino, because in my opinion, there's something more going on with the sharp gene. And you look at all the work that's being done in Europe, and actually some guys in America are doing it, like Tyler Johnson,
Right.
Chroma is doing a great job with.
Shout out, Big Tyler.
Yeah, shout out. I speak to him from time to time.
See you in August for the bow hunt, Tyler.
Yeah. Oh, you guys doing a bow hunt together?
Yeah, man. Telling you, August, third week of August, man. Come out.
He might not be healed up. You let me know. I'll take his spot. I'll go. Anyway, but some of these purples and reds, and now blues. If you look at what Tomas Seprich is doing.
Yeah, Seprich over there.
Yep. It makes you wonder, where all these colors are coming from, and is there an element of, does the sharp albino actually carry some element of a T positive? Because again, there's different subtypes of melanin genes.
Wow, dude, I haven't thought about that. You're blowing my mind a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's kind of fun to think about, and and I might be totally off. And I've asked some guys that are smarter than I am about whether anybody's really looked at this, and I haven't gotten an answer that they have, but. How could that gene be on the same allele? How could they be compatible? So, the options, from breeding, a prodigy to a sharp, are going to be that you can have, normal, which is always the dominant. So you're not gonna see anything special, or you can get a paradigm.
Yeah.
Or a paradigm if it's a prodigy gene, and when you look at what options are there, you could have in that match, you could, and this is why it gets confusing. I think this is probably why some people don't want to get into the gene, because they don't understand it. And I'm probably not doing it justice by trying to explain it. But, you could have a sharp, you could have a visual prodigy, or you could have a paradise. And they all look different, but they're on the same genetic parking spots, which is really kind of cool to me. And I also like the diversity in a litter. So you could have a litter that has sharps, prodigies, and other genetic mixes in there too. So I think it's a fun gene. I think it's something that I'm excited to work with, and in really, really high level cases, I think it gives a lot of these other T positive genes a run for their money.
Absolutely, man. So let's talk a little bit about some of your project highlights and things that you're working on within kind of the sharp complex and the blood mixed in.
Yeah, well, right now I'm trying to create a really solid foundation for basically the palette that I want to work on, which is sharp blood and T plus blood. So I was lucky enough to have 2 litters of paradigm bloods. I have a 2-year-old girl now that I'm raising up. I only got 1 in that litter, but I got 2.1 this year, and they're all amazing. So I'm really excited about that. I had another litter, my last litter of the year here, where I got 3.2 visual blood sharp mixes. So I got 2 fire opals, and I got 3 sharp albinos. All the sharp albinos are male, and the 2 fire opals are female. So I've got some potent stock now that I think, unfortunately for everybody interested, I'm probably going to be sitting on.
Don't blame you.
And I put together some other. All my pairings this year had blood. I delivered 6 litters in 3 weeks this year, which was absolutely crazy. So we had a total of 74 babies, filled the rack, and then spilled over a little bit. So they all had blood, and they're all basically going to create foundations for the future. I'm really excited to put IMG into the Paradise Blood and Paradigm Blood projects. I'm hoping next year to produce a Paradise Blood. Jeff Ronnie and Ryan Horsch and Bob are into that project as well, and I'm sure other people have kind of gotten in from those guys. So that project's about 2 years old with the double hets or hets. So it's fun. That's kind of where I'm headed with things, and then we'll try to add in some of the codom genes and whatnot.
Awesome, man. So let me ask you, why do you think that this project is poised to be one of the key projects in the future of the hobby?
I think because it's just visually stunning. I think it's poised to be an important part of the future because it's a double recessive. I think one of the focuses of my collection is to have as many visual recessive animals as possible, just because it's hard to do. So you're not going to have anybody really flood the market and start to affect the value of your animals, and especially if you can start to build on quality onto that. Just the fact that it's a hard gene to hit on, double recessives. I think even with codoms added to that, I think then you add quality to that, and I think it's one of those things it'll be a long time before it's kind of a played out combination, and I just like it, and it's to me it's really what kind of gets me going about the hobby, and my 9-year-old likes it.
Hey, dude, that means that it stands the eye test right there, brother.
Exactly right.
Awesome, man. So we're gonna take a break real quick, and then when we come back, we are gonna hit the Dirty Dozen.
The Dirty Dozen.
All right, guys, it's time for the Dirty Dozen. So, Brad, I'm going to ask you 12 questions. You give me 12 answers. You can be as short or as long with them as you want to, okay?
Yep.
All right, man. Number 1, what's the size of your current collection?
It doubled in the last 3 weeks. We're about 150.
Holy shit. And that's because of babies, right?
That's because of babies. We had a killer season this year. I paired 7, and I got 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude. Wow.
Total
great,
luck.
Great job, man.
Yeah, total luck.
All right, man. Number 2, husbandry-related question. So are you a frozen and thawed guy or a live guy, and what's your bedding choice?
So I start all the babies for their first 3 meals on live, and I do that for a couple reasons. I think it stimulates some of these natural instincts that they have. It's less obtrusive. Some of the babies are a little bit shy, and to have a little bald guy coming in there with tongs and dangling a mouse. There's nothing natural or instinctive about that. So
right.
I know some guys start babies off from frozen thaw right off the bat, but I just think it seems to me to be a better way to get them established. So the first 3 I do that, and then I'll switch them over, and I've had a really good success rate with that. And then frozen thawed throughout beyond there. And I'm lucky enough to have an ICU nurse couple that I know. They have a rat farm basically not too far away, and they used to actually provide Pete Call with his. They'd come up.
Oh, no kidding! Yeah,
I mean they have a big operation, and they're John Romeo turned me on to them, and they're right here, and they're great people. So shout out to Chuck. Bedding, I start the babies on. I actually, for the first week, I put them on some sphagnum moss just to keep everything moist and make sure they have a good shed right out of the gate. I forget who told me that.
That's actually really smart. Holy shit.
Yeah,
I wish I would have thought of that.
Yeah, it's nice. It kind of keeps it, you don't have to constantly worry about your humidity. I mean, I do a pretty good job of kind of keeping the ambient conditions in the whole room where they would need to be to keep a boa happy. And then I have little microclimates in the actual tubs. But I do that for the babies. And then after they're shed, I'll put them on paper towel, make sure they're well established, eating well, and that decreases the risk of any kind of ingestion of any foreign material or anything like that. But I then switch them probably at about a month to 6 weeks. I switch them onto aspirin, the chips, not the shredded aspirin, but those little fine chips.
Yep.
I think it was James Rubio that mentioned it. It's a really good point. I think that starts to help them develop better musculature. Yeah. And as an old timer that once told me at a reptile show, you don't want to leave them on something completely flat for too long, because they start to get this kind of they're used to being on a flat surface, and they start to get this kind of they lose their lateral musculature, and they kind of flatten out or fatten out at the bottom. I don't know that I've had any direct experience with that, but it made sense to me. And then as they get a little bit older, I switch them over to shredded aspen for the juveniles and adults.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yep.
All right, man. Yep. Number 3, what's your favorite morph or locality?
Definitely blood, no question. Locality, I love. It's probably a toss-up between BCO and Peruvians. I love some of those Iquitos Peruvians. That some of them look like they're glowing. They have such amazing coloration. But I'm not a locality guy.
All right, man. Number 4. What is the most overrated morphing? Your opinion. Everybody's favorite question.
Yeah, everybody's favorite because nobody wants to insult anybody that's working with it. So I think the fire gene for me. My collection's really built on bold, aggressive patterns, and I think that an animal should have more value the farther it goes into its genetic fulfillment, so to speak. So I think the visual of a gene should be more impressive than a het. And I think that the fire gene has its value in its hets for me. I think they do amazing things to enhance color, and they kind of reduce pattern, but they clean everything up. And I really appreciate that. But the next stage of that is a white snake, which to me is kind of the opposite of what I really like. But, I think that's probably why I feel that way about that gene. I think there's other, color enhancers and pattern enhancers that are out there that add more, that could replace the role of a fire.
Yeah, no, totally, man. Number 5, what is the most underrated morph in your opinion?
I'm going to say, we already talked about the Paradise and the Paradigm. I'd probably say that, but at risk of repeating what we previously talked about, I think the square-tail gene is a pretty underrated gene. I really like. I like recessive genes. I tend to follow those, and I think it's really cool to have a recessive gene that has both coloration components and pattern components. So I think that's kind of a sleeper gene for me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one, dude. And I really, really love what Squaretail does with Key West. When you combine those really two, cool dude, it just takes the colors to another level. I have a couple of Squaretail animals over here that I picked up from Brad Sherman, and man, I love those.
Yeah. So that's kind of one of the sub projects that I have, and of course, I actually made a double het red pastel Squaretail this year, and I'm gonna start bringing that into some of these other projects that I have going. So I'm excited about that.
That's awesome, man. All right, dude. Number 6, what is your favorite part of the hobby?
I think my favorite part of the hobby, is I actually share this hobby with my kids, especially one. I have twin boys, and especially one of them is really, really into it, and it really allows us to spend a lot of, good time together. And I think that's my most important thing is my family, and I think that that is probably the thing that I really, really enjoy the most. I mean, we've gone to Tinley together. I don't get to go and do any of the adult stuff when I go to Tinley, but I get to spend time with my son, and things like that are a lot of fun. The other part that I really enjoy is the genetic components of how they express themselves visually, and trying to pick apart a litter, and you start to see patterns if you repeat breed, and what does this gene do, and what is that going to translate to in 4 years? And I think those are the kind of the investigative work of trying to figure out what genes do what, and what little hidden kind of nuances there are in different litters. I think that's really kind of intellectually stimulating for me. So that's fun.
Awesome, man. All right, number 7. What is the worst part of the hobby?
So I think the worst part of the hobby, I think this, the easy answer is, tire kickers and low ballers, and but I think other guys have talked about that, and I'll try to take a different route. I'll tell you, the worst part of the hobby for me is trying to sell these animals. I love all these animals that I produce. I'm so, I love. I don't think I can get rid of some of these things, and it's really hard. That's the hardest thing.
I'm with you, dude.
Yeah, it's hard. You make these really cool things. These people call you and say, "Hey, I'm really interested," and they're willing to offer you really serious money, and you're just like, "Oh, God, I don't know if I can. I don't think I can get rid of it." So I think the hardest thing for me is deciding what to keep and what to give up. And maybe that's because I'm still relatively kind of new back in the hobby, even though I've been doing it for a long, long time. Back into the breeding part of it. I think I still feel like I need to create a foundation. So it's hard for me to give stuff up. So I'm a little bit of a hoarder right now.
Yeah, no, dude, that's completely understandable. Plus, we spend a lot of time and effort trying to produce the certain snakes that we end up having in our hobby and selling stuff, especially stuff that you would consider your own holdbacks.
Yeah.
It's tough, man. Like, here, honestly, what part drives me nuts? And much love to all my boys that come up here. Like we were talking about kind of offline, every third weekend of August, I have this huge, bow hunt over here that I host for a bunch of friends, and many of them are from the reptile and boa world, right? And when guys come up here, it's basically like a giant shit show. Guys, essentially fly in with their bows and a sleeping bag, right?
That's
and
awesome.
The house looks like my house looks like a college, frat house during that week, right?
Old school.
Yeah, dude, because, there's guys sleeping everywhere. And a couple of guys wind up, obviously, sleeping in the bow room because it's nice and warm, right? And when they do so, they're going to open tubs. They're going to look at stuff. And a lot of them will look at certain holdbacks. And, there's been a couple times where they've offered me really, really good money for it, to the point where, you're seriously considering it. And then, obviously, they'll do it in front of my wife.
Oh, no,
very strategically, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because then my wife's like, yeah, dude, sell the damn snake. and I'm like, no, I don't want to. This is exactly what I've been chasing for 3-4 years.
Yeah, and to be able to watch them develop, I've really been working hard to try to get some bloodlines that get better with age, especially with blood. That's been a hard thing to, I think, convince some people of, that they don't brown out with age necessarily. And so I don't want to get rid of them I definitely don't want to get rid of them at 6 months.
Yeah.
I'm finding that now my animals are, 2 years, 3 years out, and they're getting better and better, and I don't want to miss it. So
absolutely, dude.
So I'll keep those.
All right, man. Number 8. What other species do you keep and why? And if you don't currently keep other species, what other species would you like to potentially keep in the future?
I don't know if I mentioned, if we were talking offline, or I have a dog kennel. We have Damascans, which is a rare breed of dog that kind of looks like a wolf. So that's non-reptile related, but love that whole thing. It's a blast. Right now I don't keep other species, but I am in the process of preparing to get into basins.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I kind of miss the emeralds, and I really used to love the arboreals. And at the time, I was keeping northerns, but the basins were just starting to be imported when I was getting out to kind of go and chase my education. So, but it's amazing what guys like Ed Marino are doing, and so I'm really I'm going to get back into those at some point, and I'm starting to do my research now.
Yeah, dude, I'm 100% with you on that. Yeah. Ever since I had Warren Booth on the show, dude, I've been Googling basins a hell of a lot, dude.
Yeah,
and they're looking at stuff like that.
They're amazing. They're amazing. The bloodlines that they're working with now on some of these high whites and snowflake line and the diamond line are just really cool. Yeah.
All right, man. Number 9. What is a common misconception about you?
So it's funny. So I'm a sports medicine doc, and so I take care of a lot of athletes, a lot of pro athletes, high level athletes, football players. Before the Arena Football League closed, I was the team doctor for the Philadelphia Soul. So
oh, cool.
Yeah, and so people they look up your bio or whatever, and it's college football player, Division I football player and track athlete, and people come in and I'll go in and talk, and they'll be like, well, when's the doctor coming in? And I'll say, I am the doctor. And they'll be like, you're too small to be a football player. So I'm like, I'm a little guy, but
I'm with you. I feel you on that, dude.
I was, so, I always kind of have this canned line when I come back. I'm like, well, I don't have to be as big as you if you can't catch me. And because I was a receiver, kick return, punt return, so I was fast. I ran, I was 100 dash and 60 meter indoor. And so I think the misconception is that I was this big hulking football player, and I'm really just a little guy.
Hey, man, that's a good misconception to have, dude.
Yeah,
I've been exploiting that same misconception my whole life.
Yeah.
Because when most people imagine special ops guys, they imagine these huge Arnold Schwarzenegger type of guys.
You're right. Same thing.
And you know what? There's definitely guys like that out there, but they're actually the exception to the rule. The majority of us are pretty average looking. You know, we look like dudes that are in shape, but you know, you can pick us out of a lineup for the most part, and that's kind of the way that we enjoy it.
That's right.
All right, brother. Number 10. What makes you say, what was I thinking when you look back at your time in the hobby?
You know, I think I got to be honest. I don't, you know, some of the trips back and forth across the country with boas in my car and setting up a temporary, you know, closet in my room when I come home on break, things like that. But that was all fun. I really don't have any regrets. I think, frankly, you know, both personally and professionally, I think you learn through your struggles. And I think that all the things that, you know, were hard during my, you know, development of this hobby and getting into it, out of it, and into it again, I think they've all been important lessons. So I don't know there's any real big what was I thinking moments, to be honest, which is probably good.
Yeah, cool. Number 11, what's one tip you would give the people looking to invest in boas?
Have a plan. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would say. You know, we talked a little bit about, you know, preparing your environment before you start bringing animals in. I think that's probably a good one too. But have a plan. I would, you know, if I could go back, I'd buy females first in projects that really had a future and had my interest, and then I'd see, you know, where that project's starting to go, and then I'd follow those females up with males, you know, that are appropriate breeding age. You know, I like to wait until my females are definitely 4.5, you know, in that season,
right?
Before I breed them. You know, I did make a mistake early on of trying to breed a female early because I was a little impatient. So I think patience is probably another recommendation I would give. But and I lost her. She actually dropped on her you know 105 post ovulation shed day.
No, man.
She dropped two babies, and then stopped. And you know, I didn't want to bother her. In retrospect, I should have. I came back later, and you know, it was unfortunate. I had my son with me, and she's upside down with her mouth wide open.
Yeah, know the feeling. Yeah,
she was full of babies. So I did my own necropsy after. She was full of babies, and she had a partially developed, almost mummified embryo that was blocking her oviduct, so she couldn't pass the rest of the babies. And you know, in retrospect, I'm not sure I could have done anything about that, but
right.
You know, it was unfortunate. And I'll tell you one piece of advice I would give breeders now. Yeah, you know, you hear stories a lot about females dying around pregnancy or during pregnancy. Or I had 2 females this year. So ever since that happened, I made a point of, after delivery, doing a really good job. John Romeo gave me this trick of letting your females, after they deliver, soak in a little bit of really dilute Listerine. So you fill warm water in a bucket and put a little Listerine in there so that the smell of the birth comes off of them, and so they're not as nasty when they come back out. It seems to work. So, but I do a really good job of palpating or running my thumb or my fingers down their belly, and making sure that I don't feel any retained slugs or babies or anything. And 2 of the 6 girls that delivered this year, I actually milked slugs out of after she delivered. And if that stays there, that's potentially going to start to decompose and necrose and potentially lead into an infection, and or it's going to cause scarring in their oviduct, which could prevent further deliveries from successfully passing through. So it's a little tip that I give people now, just because I think that could prevent further problems. And they were pretty subtle. I'll tell you, they were full-size slugs, but pretty subtle. And I feel like, you know, given my experience with surgery, I'm pretty perceptive with my fingers. But I grossed out my kids because we plopped a slug in the bucket, you know, after pushing it out. But I think it'll have potentially saved them and me from a lot of heartache down the line.
Dude, I'm glad you said that because I learned that lesson, that hard lesson myself last season, right? I ended up losing a female for a similar reason, and then ever since that moment, the one thing that I've always done is I palpate and I ultrasound post-birth. Just to make sure that there's nothing else stuck. Because it was the same thing. There was a slug that she had retained in her, right? That actually we didn't catch. And, she lived actually another 4 months. And she just kept going downhill. I couldn't figure out what was happening. Yeah. It got to the point where she wasn't eating. I was like, well, I've had boas go off a feed for a long time. Maybe it's just one of those things. But typically, after a good bath, they tend to be pretty aggressive feeders post-birth, at least all the ones that I've had in the past. And this one just wasn't recovering. Eventually, came into the snake room when they opened up the cage, and I found her, upside down. And when I did the necropsy, I found the exact same thing. There was like a calcified slug in her that I don't think ever had processed its way out.
Yeah, I think that everybody should do that after their boas deliver.
Awesome, man. All right, final question, number 12. Any shout-outs you want to throw out there?
Yeah, definitely shout out to John Romeo. He's been such a great help to me, in this hobby, and Bob and Ryan Horst, the Jersey Boa Mafia. Those guys are really, really solid guys. I'm glad to have them close by. Little shout out to Gary Audette. He's a buddy of mine up in New York who's got some amazing projects going on, and he's got a killer potential litter due in another couple of weeks with the Paradigm Blood project. I'm not going to ruin it for him. I'll let him. It's his thunder, not mine. Yeah,
awesome. All right, guys. Well, that wraps it up for today. So, Brad, tell the people out there where they can see more of your animals and learn more about you.
Yeah, so I list all my animals on Morph Market. We're actually in the process now of getting through our last sheds for our baby litters that came out this season. I'll be posting those soon. We're on Facebook, Breakneck Boa Company. Also Instagram, breakneck.boa.co. Just a quick mention, there is another boa hobbyist out there that has a page called Breakneck Boas. That's not me. So we're Breakneck Boa Company. So just a little clarification. No big deal. And then if you need to email, we're at breakneck.boa.co@gmail.com.
Awesome, guys. All right. Thanks for listening. We are out. Guys, that was a great episode. Thanks to Dr. Brad Bernardini of Breakneck Boa Company. Join us for our next episode as we speak with Tony Pantaleo of Sencal Exotics. We're going to talk about his work with locality boas and our shared love of falconry. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Do us a favor. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube. Until next time, grow 'em slow.